rainbows, MCs, earnest, we lack humor, music, multicultural, singing, walking our talk, love at the center. Sophia Betancourt, what a power. We are part of something greater, wider, more important. I'm proud. Surprised at how woke gray-haireds can be. Struggles of racism and discrimination in Florida, our sibling UU. Entitlement, our voices. Some people feel they must be heard over and over. Our voice matters. Use it. Make space for others. That was my free writing initial impressions of my attendance at the UUA National Conference in June. I participated virtually. Going in person didn't work for me and my schedule, but I did take a few days off of work, and Wednesday through Sunday, I watched from morning until evening. There were general sessions, there was spiritual sessions, there were workshops. I was an official delegate, so I did register votes, and the top kind of most impassioned topic was, do we rewrite our 7 principles? And there was some really great discussion happening, and discussion happening for months leading up to the UUA, and online, and special groups and listservs and things had been happening around this topic. And I learned in the process what we were voting on was just simply, do we want to continue discussing? And that passed. Yes, we are going to continue to discuss. And something else I learned was that our UU bylaws require that we revisit this every 15 years. And the last time it's been revised and thoroughly revisited was 1985. So we're many, many years ago. And if you don't revisit and have these discussions, then things get settled. And one of the things I love about our faith, our tradition, is that we do evolve. And so I think it's important that these things are able to be discussed and our values reviewed. I attended a number of workshops, and one thing, let's see, I'll just cover a little bit. One I covered was, or rather that I attended, was about mission trips. And really, and this was from the UU College of Social Justice, asking individuals and faith communities to be very reflective about the purpose of going on these trips. Is it to serve yourself, or is it truly to meet a need that has been identified by the community that you are supporting? There should be reciprocity, there should be relationship, and we need to have a power analysis. When we cross lines of power and privilege, we need to name that, and we have to think about what power, entitlement, privilege we're bringing to the situation. And kind of a key question in any kind of work we do that's serving our neighbors and our community: are we centering our experience, or are we centering their experience? Are we benefiting ourselves by making ourselves feel good, or are we actually doing work that's needed and requested and is supporting based on what they need? I also attended a workshop on Zoom inclusion, and I learned that we are doing almost everything, although there are things we can do to improve, but we're doing so much that is recommended to help create an online and an in-person community And one tip was always use microphones. And we know this, but for those of you in the audience that are sometimes spontaneously moved to say things, please do find a microphone, because that allows folks on Zoom and online to be able to hear your beautiful comment. And that actually, this was one I thought was interesting, is something's going on that Zoomies can't participate, that the service should stop so that we can right the ship so that the Zoomies can participate again. And that's something I think we can talk through a little bit when we do have a Zoom issue. How do we handle that? Fortunately, almost never happens, but occasionally it does. So, and then I'll just one last workshop I'll share. I did many, but I took a workshop on being an anti-racist. Shelley Tolchuk is a leader in Aware Los Angeles, and she's a professor at Mount St. Mary's College. And she was really talking about how anti-racists miss opportunities to make a difference with emerging anti-racists if we don't care for them as people along the way. We need to be hard on the problem, easy on people. And when people we know say something that's racist, how do we engage that person with curiosity and care? How do we help invite them in to a new way of thinking? So this workshop I found really, really thought-provoking and interesting. It makes me want to read Professor Tolchuk's book. I'll just finish with, I think it was a great experience. I'm glad to have participated. Next year is going to be 100% virtual, and maybe we can have watch parties at UUFRC. And let me know if you're interested in that. By the way, I am not able to be with you today because I'm at my cousin's wedding in San Diego. And with that, I will end, and thank you for listening about the UUA conference.
My name is Beth Eggers. I'm a tall, white, cisgender woman in her early 70s with shoulder-length brown hair, and I'm wearing my favorite color of teal. A main theme at the GA this year was inclusion, making sure that people were included equally on Zoom and in person, making sure that people with all different abilities were able to have a full experience. So one thing that happened was that every single person who introduced themselves gave a physical description, as I just did. And as a side note, I got a kick out of hearing how people describe themselves. You know, what they included and what they left out. Like, I left out the size 12 part of my description, you know? So some of my experiences were disappointing, I will tell you, because of trying to make Zoom equivalent. They lessened some of the experiences that are usually at the GA in person. Things didn't start till 10. There weren't two breakout sessions, there was only one. Discussions were shorter. There were fewer live choices, more things were on Zoom. And I was feeling disappointed about that. And then I got really uncomfortable thinking, well, am I being an entitled Karen, you know, just because I can afford to be there and use my, you know, vacation money to go? So I have to say that was an uncomfortable situation for me. That said, I still had a wonderful time, and I found the business section, which I thought would be boring, to be really fascinating, because UUs from all over the country were represented. And hearing the pros and the cons and hearing different points of view, when really the only church I've ever known was UUFRC. I'm a newbie. So I found that fascinating. The one takeaway I had was that everybody I talked to in sessions, on the street, at restaurants, I would talk about what we're doing at UUFRC. I'd talk about everything that we have here. You know, the Zoom and the Action Sundays and the MOCA and hiking groups and the IO chats that we have and book clubs and on, all the things that I take for granted. I heard over and over again, we don't have anything like that. So my biggest takeaway was how lucky we are here, how lucky I am. And then as I wrote that sentence, I thought, well, no, it's not luck at all. It has taken over 2 decades of vital, energetic volunteer work by leaders and volunteers. And you know who you are. You're all over the place here, you know. You have built this wonderful church. And so my biggest takeaway was, thank you. The UU bylaws were adopted by the church in 1961. Article 2 established vital characteristics of the new Universalist Association and outlined the 6 principles and 5 sources. As Anna mentioned, it's supposed to be revisited every 15 years. Since 1961, principles were added to oppose discrimination, affirm inclusivity, support anti-racism. Sexist language was removed, and 1 new source, earth-centered spirituality, was added in 1995. But the change happening this year is a biggie. The principles are kind of going away, the ones we're used to, and being replaced by completely new language. It's a dramatic change. So Mary and I are going to give a little flavor of what some of the pros and cons were this year. And why don't you go? I need a sip of water.
I'm Mariana Raymond, member of this fellowship, and I was a GA delegate in Pittsburgh. I want to share with you my thoughtfully considered opinion that the so-called revision of Article 2 of our bylaws and rules is a disappointing and far inferior document. It is now slated to replace the strong and succinct 7 principles, which have served us so well. If you look at the UUA website, you will find a big red X on the 7 principles. You can study the UUA board's rationale for the change from principles to values and how the document has morphed from consideration of adding an anti-racism 8th principle to this complete overhaul. I'm not averse to change, but the change must be an improvement, which this is not, in my opinion. For starters, the 6 words in the graphic that you've been seeing printed on the back of your order of service. The 6 words are very ambiguous. In order to understand their intended meaning, one must refer to the text of the Article 2 document, where one finds 2 or 3 sentences of explication. If you read through the text of all the 6 values, you will find many redundancies and excess verbiage. You may even find sprinkled throughout some wording from the 7 principles, but unfortunately they are buried and not up front as they were. Now imagine explaining to a newcomer what UUs believe, using this current graphic and your own paraphrase. So I'll give you an example. Pluralism. Somebody, well, what do you mean by pluralism? Oh, wait just a minute. I better look and see. Oh, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. Well, a lot of that is already in the 7 principles. But there's a further. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That's one of my favorite principles, but it's buried in the document of the bylaws. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. So that's one example. I don't have a lot of time here, but To me, the 7 principles are well-constructed guidelines, clear, very usable, in explaining our faith. From them flow our values and actions. I hope that over the coming year, you will find time to make your own side-by-side comparisons, and that our congregation will have more robust discussions before the final vote in 2024.
Well, first of all, I went to the GA agreeing with absolutely everything Mariana said. I've changed my views a little bit, and here's 4 reasons. 1, I grew up in the Catholic tradition where things changed over centuries, if they changed at all. And it's kind of refreshing to have a church that says every 15 years, hey, let's see if we're still relevant. Let's see if we can do better. So this is an attempt to do better. As much as I was really attached to the principles, they kind of drew me into the church, I realized that I personally could only recite the 2 or 3 that were meaningful to me. And as I asked around, I realized that was true of most people. You know, they held 1 or 2, but they really couldn't tell you what all 7 were. So maybe they weren't working as well as I thought. Now, this one really got to me. As we're listening and looking at pros and cons over the 4 days, I noticed that everybody on the side of keeping the 7 principles, not everybody, about 90% were over 50 and white. Whereas the people who were saying, no, let's change the wording, let's change the language, were a much wider group of young people of color. And I thought, well, wait a second, maybe I'm a little bit stuck, you know, in what's important to me, and I'm not being open enough to what UUs are like all around the country, all around the world. And then the 4th one is that I realized I don't have to follow the rules. I don't have to get rid of the 7 principles. You know, if somebody asks me, what does it mean to be a UU, I'm going to say, we follow principles and values. And I'm going to throw in the ones that were important to me. So I am not quite on board completely with, I call it the flower, but I'm getting there. I'm closer than I was before, and I think it's an important year, as Mariana said, to think about what you want and what we want. And before the final vote, you know, you have chances to make your voices heard.